We're going to have a close look at it and see why this is actually a groundbreaking kit. Hello, this is BJ from Hearns Hobbies, and today I have a special review of a Tamiya kit which is just about to be released, and we're quite lucky to be able to have one of these to look at. Now, I would normally have the box art to show you, but this is a pre-production kit of the Phantom in 48 scale. This is the F-4B. Now, the F-4B was the most produced, I guess it's the first production Phantom that was ever produced. It was actually, the Phantom itself in all its different guises is the most manufactured of all the supersonic aircraft. So they've made a lot of them. They first started developing them in the 60s. The first Bs started coming out in the developing in the 50s. First ones came out in the 60s, and they were first used in the Vietnam War. So this is a B which predominantly was used in the Vietnam War, and hence there's three different options for the markings, which are specifically Vietnam era. Okay, so now we don't have a box because the box art isn't available for us at the moment, and the instructions are actually photocopied, so they're pre-production as well. But I've got all the plastic here, and we're going to have a close look at it and see why this is actually a groundbreaking kit. So out of all the kits that have been released so far, Tamiya generally have certain groundbreaking kits, and they've really pushed this one to a point where it is absolutely fantastic. So let's have a closer look at the parts. I'll put the instructions aside. We'll have a look at those at the end, like I usually do. All right, so we'll start off with fuselage. All right, let's take it out of the plastic so we can have a better look. All right. So first thing that's really noticeable is the odd shapes you've got from the left to the right fuselage. So this is what you would traditionally expect to see. You've got a full half. Over this side, it's actually been split. So they've designed, this is a locating area here, which will fit into this section of the fuselage. And this, I think, is to aid in the construction so that everything is aligned perfectly. Now, they've put a lot of thought into the whole kit. Now, I'll see if I can lift this up to give you a better idea of how fine the panel lines are on this particular kit. Now, Tamiya generally are better known for quite deep panel lines and deep details. And this one here is so fine, you may not be able to see much of it, but if you're familiar with, say, Hasegawa kits, Hasegawa is best known for their super fine detail, and this is at that level. Okay, so it's less of a build-friendly kit. Traditionally, I'd say a Tamiya kit is one of those kits that you just like to build because it goes together very well, and it's very easier to finish off with panel lining and such. This one is much more accurate, I would say, because of the fineness of the detail. And I think they've done a remarkable job. So with doing very fine detail, it's always very difficult to get the detail to run all the way across to the bottom here. So they've used some interesting engineering techniques. So the spine here is a separate item, so you can get very full detail molded on a separate piece. It also allows for the lack of a seam line across the back here. And seam lines, when you join it all together, they're the biggest bane of a model builder, because quite often the seam line covers up a lot of detail. Okay, so you've got this. The other thing that is very noticeable is, if I spin this around again, the detail that's incorporated on the inside is also very sharp. So you've got areas here which are fine, ready for the cockpit detail to drop in. Also the thickness of the plastic, so it feels tough, as you would expect from a Tamiya kit, because they're generally quite heavy, I would call them, but it's thin enough so that they can incorporate a lot of detail. So it doesn't feel too chunky, because when it gets too chunky, you end up having a strong kit. But when you go into details such as the cockpit, it tends to be compressed. Now, the vertical stabiliser is not moulded. You would expect that so on a lot of kits. So that's all separate with multi-pieces. The engine intakes, because they're complicated, to be able to allow for great detail because of separate parts as well. So this I would not call a simple kit. I guess in the same vein as their recent F-14 48 scale kits, there's a lot of parts, and a lot of parts are good because it adds that final detail. It allows the parts to be molded, and you have extra crisp lines, extra rivets, and basically all the good bits that make a model really interesting. Now with this, there's quite a few different options. So I'll pop this aside. All right, so you got your multiple piece fuselage there. Next we'll move on to the wing section. Okay. So you can see here you've got the wings are in multi-piece. You've got the base here, and then you've got the top sections. Let's spin around. Okay, so these sections here will be joining over here. You've got the cutouts here for the undercarriage. And these sections here are the split sections where the wingtips would be. So one of the options is either having the deployed wingtips, or you can have them folded as well. And there's a clever section for giving you the options for that as well. These are cut out here, so the flaperons are separate, and they can be set in the up or the down position. Here you can see options for the sensors on the nose. There's two options there. You've got your undercarriage doors and various bits and pieces which I don't quite recognize here, but you've got the flaps here and other sensors as well. Okay, again, we're trying to see that super fine detail. Let me just move that around, but it is very, very fine. Okay, so you've got the join here. So once the wings are joined here, you basically have to only sand slight part here and here. So with this, the design concept has to be flawless as well, because if you've got this fine a detail, you don't want to be putting together parts where you have to sand and lose detail as well. So a lot of considerations being put into that in the design of how this kit goes together. Over here you can see the cutouts as well. These are for the brakes. Again, they can be deployed or in the set position. Okay, let's pop that over there. All right, so next we have this set of sprues. There's two, they're identical. Let me just split those up. Okay, so biggest, I guess, inside here are the engines themselves. So they spend a lot of time, these are the actual end nozzles for the engines. Now quite often when you have a aircraft kit, the engines are molded in one piece, just for simplicity I think, but unfortunately in doing that, you can't get a lot of the detail which is in those individual vanes which control the propulsion. So the engines themselves have a lot of pieces. So you've got 6 pieces of each of these sections just for the nozzles. So if I hold it up, let's just move this one out of the way. Now that's the external side, but it's the internal side that has all this fine strut detail. Now usually to get this on most other kits, you need to go and invest in say a resin upgrade, which just adds to the cost of the model. But to me it's been very clever and being able to do this without the need of getting any resin aftermarket parts. So you'll see here, this is the two engines. You'll combine these two parts together. So you've got an upper and a lower. And one of the parts you just trim the two parts off. And the two pins you see these right here, these are actually used as a spacer, almost like a strut between the two fuselages to keep it strong and from compressing. Now we've got over here, we've got the engine intakes. So from the engine itself, we have the ejector seats. The ejector seats actually have quite a lot of parts. Now you've got multiple, you've got the cushions here, seat bases, here's the main frames, and then you also have pilot figures as well. And the pilot figures add quite a lot extra. And it's unfortunate that a lot of kits don't include pilots because I think figures add so much to a model. They give it a sense of scale and also gives it the human element. Okay, so over here we've got the top, I guess it's the wingtips. Okay, we're spinning around. You see here there's locating areas for fitting the wingtips onto the wings. Now, as I said earlier, there's options for the wingtips. You can either have them folded or deployed, and that's where this cutout is so clever, because there's two options there. You can either have the bent ones or the straight ones, and because it overlaps from the wingtip to the actual wing, it gives that section of the model a lot of strength. A lot of other models where it's been separated, they're actually only held on by a couple of struts, and that point is very weak and they tend to break off very easily. Okay, so apart from that, you've got halves here of the drop tanks. Let's just move it like this, it's probably easier. And then let's see if I can recognize any other parts. So you've got some wheels. Over here you've got the main landing gear wheels. There's the nose wheels. Spin this back around. These I'm not sure, but we'll look in the manual at the very end and we'll be able to pick up all the little bits and pieces. So as you can see, there's a lot of parts just for the engines themselves, multi-pieces. And then over here you can see the hoops that are pulled for releasing the ejection seats. Now, if I have a closer look, they appear to have a lot of fine surface detail in them. So I'll see if you can sort of see that. And also on the sides of the ejection seats too. Lots of great detail. Even though a lot of this you won't see, it's always great to be able to visualize them before you glue them in, because it gives you an idea of the overall structure of the real aircraft. Okay, so there are engines. All right, they can go over here. All right, let's look at these clear parts. Now the clear parts are quite interesting too. I might as well find the other ones. There's two sets of clear parts. Okay, now the reason between the two sets of clear parts is you've got the options of having the canopies open or the canopies closed. Now having them open means there's quite a few parts. Okay, so you've got your main windshield here, and then you have the front and the rear cockpit, and then you have the section that's in between those. Now quite often you find kits will only offer you this selection, meaning that if you wanted it closed, you have to try to line up all these sections, and it gets really messy. So that's where this part comes in, because what they've done is they've got this very cleverly slide molded section here, and that incorporates the front, the back, and the center section already molded in one. Okay, so you've got this very smooth aerodynamic finish already, and you just need to match that up with the front windscreen, and that's it. So quite amazing. Now with the slide molding, they've been able to get that perfect contour. So if we look at it this way, it slightly creeps in. Now if it was only two piece, there's no way you'd be able to get all this crisp detail. And they've been able to do that all in one shot here. Now there is a line across the top, which you just need to clean up, which would be easy enough to polish lightly because the molding is very clean already. And I guess that's something you'll have to do on all of these. So there's always a little fine join line across here and here, but that's some of the things you just need to do just so they can get that accurate curve within the mold. Simply means that the mold has to come this way, and from the bottom. But you've watched some of my tutorials on how to polish. I mean, that's very easy to achieve. Now with a close look, so let's have a look at this front of the windshield. You've got all the framework, which is all very nicely detailed. It's got a matte finish on the outside and then fully polished for all the clear parts. and that helps you with the masking and the painting of that as well. So in the full production kit, there's going to be a set of painting masks that will come with it, and that will make it much simpler too, because it's just a matter of aligning them, but the shape will be perfect, because some of those complex curves aren't the friendliest to try to do manually. All right, so there's the nice clear parts. On this one as well, apart from canopy parts, you've got a head-up display and you've got some lenses for navigation lights. Okay, let's pop those there. All right, over here we have, so here we've got the horizontal stabiliser. So it's horizontal, but I mean on the Phantom it's got this angle on it, which makes it quite distinctive for this particular aircraft. Now they've been able to design this so that it's held on with polycaps, so that after it's been assembled, this can actually rotate on the fuselage. Here we have the air, what do you call them? I guess they're the tunnels for the jet exhaust. Over here, these are the optional parts for attaching the wingtips to the main wing. So this is the part which I think is really, really clever. I mean, the wingtips aren't totally flat with the wings. They have a slight kick up, and that's already been built in perfectly on either this one. So this one's reasonably flat. This is the one with the wingtips deployed. Or if you want them folded, then you have them pre-folded here. So if I hold it on this particular angle, you might be able to see that's actually an L shape. Now this is a game changer for me, because when you apply these, you get the perfect angle. You won't have to guess. And then here, because it's already molded with the join is incredibly strong, and it has very nice join detail in there as well. And particularly when you have the folded wings, it's always very hard to make the left and the right match perfectly, and also have the strength. Because if I have a look at this, it's probably at least 0.5 mil to 1 mil in various sections of just this one piece here. Very amazing. Quite like that idea. Over here you can see this is the end part of the tail. This is the actual section which will fit into here. That is why there's round pivot parts, because this is the point where it's going to be supporting the horizontal stabilizer so it can rotate. Okay, so there's other various bits and pieces. Looks like options for the rear end on the tail. And then we've got various covering panels over here. So these are the panels that fit into the rear of the horizontal stabilizer. Okay, let's pop that aside. Okay, moving on next. So we've got another piece here with a horizontal stabilizer. I don't think this particular part is used. Couldn't see it in the manual earlier, but it is quite different in shape. So there's probably a good chance that a different version is going to come out. Now the biggest difference is you'll notice that on the leading edges here, you've got this ribbing effect, and this one doesn't have it. Okay, but that's included in the kit. Okay, and then the other parts we've got these sections here. This is for the vertical stabilizer, and this is for this particular version's sensors. You've got the nose cone. So on the bottom here, this is where the nose sensor goes, and earlier we saw there were two options for different sensors for here. And again, super fine detail. And with the edges, now I'm trying to feel the mold line, and I can't really feel it. So that's something to be expected from Tamiya. I mean, it's very perfect. It'll just need a light sand, because there will be a very fine mold line there, but that's all you need. Super clean. All right, so what do we have next? All right, so over here, we've got the vertical stabilizer. So vertical stabilizer here with the parts I showed earlier with the sensors. So that just fits into this end and this end. Great thing is they've been separated with the panel line. So once it goes on, you're not going to have a lot of joins. And this allows them to give you different options. So I'm sure there'll be various options coming out in the future with this base. Okay, so we've got over here, this is the base of the cockpit. So this is the opening for the front undercarriage. I'm pretty sure. Yep, should be. Now over here you'll see the shapes for the Sparrow missiles. There's various parts here for the cockpits. So you got the main cockpit and then the secondary walls for the cockpit itself. Here is the hood, a little like the sun visor, and then let's see. These are all basically cockpit components. Okay. This part here looks on a resting hook. So we'll come back to that and we'll see what that's all about. But if I hold it up closer, you'll be able to see how all the little dials for cockpit instruments are portrayed. And then across here, this is all the dials as well. So they're actually proud of the surface. So none of this totally smooth and just rely on a decal. These are all actually three-dimensional details, which make it look very, very nice indeed. All right, let's move on. There's still a lot of bits to go. Okay, let's move this bag out of the way. All right, so here we've got the main tank. So main drop tank goes in the center of the fuselage. There's various weapons pylons. So for Sparrows, and then also for the sidewinders. There's this large section here, which is actually the spar for supporting the wings. Now, this is for the main undercarriage, and this is a really chunky piece because this is actually structural with additional detail. So you've got little bits of detail here which add to the effect of the model, but you've got this strong truss section which is giving you all the strength of supporting the wings. And it's this sort of intersecting design which makes this amazing as well, because it has a very strong inner structure. Just make sure that nothing moves or alters after the build, and also gives everything a very rock solid feel. It's going to be very firm when it's all together. It says large locating points, and then internal structures for all the operating parts of the undercarriage. Okay, so with all the pylons as well, there's very fine rivet detail. There's a nose gear. Then over here you can see the additional detail here as well. So all the workings, parts of the engine detail. Okay, and so here you've got the optional flaperons. So I shouldn't say they're optional. The option is whether you have them up or down. So this point here is where the hinge goes in, and it's sealed up with this. So you can either have straight hinges or you can have them bent. And that's these hinges here. So you can see how they locate. Okay, it's very nice. So you got some hydraulics here. This is also for undercarriage. So quite a unique design in how this aircraft goes together. All right, let's move along. And over here, what do we have? Okay, so we've got some more pylons here. Now these particular pylons, they've got the side mounts there that'll take the sidewinders. They're the sidewinder mounts. This is the backbone of the fuselage. So this is where normally you would find, if you've got fuselage halves, when they're glued together, you have this huge line down the center which you have to fill and sand. But what they've done here is, because it's separate, they've been able to mold in these particular sensors. So you can just see those little tiny ones there. So as they're glued on, the sides become the panel line and it looks totally seamless. Over here you got the main gear. Various sensors here again. struts. So this particular item here is a refueling probe. So that's another option. You can either have the probe out, or you can have it fully closed off. And then there's some little bits and pieces for the cockpit there as well. So a few instruments or dials. Okay, really nice. Okay, let's pop that here. All right, so I've got a few more things to go. Let's open this one up. Okay, now here we've got the jet intakes. Now with the Phantom, they have a very unique shape about them. So usually it's done in just a couple of bits to make the assembly simple, but Tamiya have used multiple pieces to be able to replicate all the spacing and the unique shapes of the intakes. And so as you can see here, this is the main section which you'll see on the side of the fuselage. You'll see here where, so these parts here are the actual deflectors. So they sit a little bit proud of the fuselage, and then this would sit over the top to complete that. Over here you see the cockpit tub. So you've got the pilot's station here, a secondary seat here. And then again, you've got over here a structural element which is designed into the front undercarriage. So over here you've got pins, so they'll attach to the sides of the fuselage. So they'll act as basically a rod to stop the sides from crushing in. And then the particular tub is glued onto this, and then this adds all the structure to the front of the fuselage. Over here you see the arms of the pilots, and then there's various parts here. So the canopy itself is incredibly detailed. So rather than only having the clear parts, it also has the inner frame, and then there's frames for each of the bulkheads along there as well. So you can see these parts here. These are all canopy parts. Also here, these are the sides of the canopy. So these are the parts which would actually lock on the canopy to the fuselage after it's been set down. Here you see the bulkheads between the two pilot stations. And this will probably give you a better idea of the framework of the base of the canopy. So the clear section is going to be glued on top of this. And then there's this sort of loop or hooped framework that sits within here. Over here you see the structural element that I described earlier. So you've got 2 pins here, basically on a rod, and 2 pins here. And this is for the crush strength along the side of the cockpit. So the cockpit's going to be sitting within here. You've got basically sections to build the box of the front undercarriage, what do you call it, enclosure. And then you've got some foot pedals, and part of that's the rear section of the canopy. Okay, so now we have the final parts, and these are 2 identical sprue, and this is the armament. Okay, so we've got the Sprues, which are the bigger air-to-air missiles here, and then there's the sidebinders as well. So the sidebinders are in 2 large parts. You've got the warhead section here, and then you have the main body over here, and they're basically connected in this section. They're split in half, and so they're perfectly aligned once they're glued together. The Sprues are all in one piece pretty much, and they're molded in such a way that you're always going to have a slight mold line across here, but it's actually already pretty smooth, so it just needs a little bit of cleaning up, and then that'll be fine. And then obviously the fins are glued in to Sprues. Sidewinder, you've got the rear stabiliser, which is bayoneted into here, and then you have some more fins across the nose there. And that's pretty much it there for the armament. Now let's just pop that aside. And then the last part is polycaps. Okay, so 2 little polycaps there. And these are basically used in the horizontal stabiliser to allow for the movement. So these get sandwiched inside, a couple of pivoting points, and then you can set the horizontal stabilizer to whichever position you like. And that's all the parts there. So let's get into the manual and we'll have a closer look at all the bits and pieces. So as you can see, this is a pre-production manual. Basically, it's just a photocopy. So this may change in the future. Fairly standard sort of layout. You have the paint guide here. Very comprehensive. Recommended tools. And as we open up, just across here, we have the 3 different versions of the decals that are going to be supplied. So these are all a naval version and all set in Vietnam. So you need to pay attention here because it's an A, B or C version. So you basically need to select which decal set you're going to use because there are slight differences in the appearance between these versions. So as you go, there'll be a call for either an A, a B or a C, and you just need to follow whether or not you need to put in extra holes or where particular decals need to go. All right, so with the construction, it starts with the size of the fuselage is here, with the painting on some of the internal parts of the cockpit. Over here, there's a shorter section, which we saw earlier. So this is where you select either having the open fuel probe or the closed. So if it's closed, it's just a blanking part that goes here. Open, then it's got this module that goes in place. Got some navigation lights. And then on this side, we start preparing the 2 halves of the fuselage. So this is the split half. So front of the fuselage is connected to the rear part of the fuselage. And then we start with the construction of the cockpit. So cockpit here, you've got the cockpit tub, and then we start putting in the pedals. And then these are the side walls, which are going to be mounted onto the sides of the cockpit. Okay, you've got the bulkheads being built up here, which separate the sections. Again, you've got the sidewalls, and then these are the main dials and control knobs. Now from there, start building the front gear bay. Now that gear bay is going to be fit into this structural section. So as you can see, this is that chunky section that's for the front. It's got 4 pins in here and 2 flat pins here. This is to support the size of the fuselage, so it doesn't have that crushing problem. It has a solid compression strength. These are the walls going into that particular front bay, and then the cockpit sub-assembly drops on top of that. So you have this full sub-assembly, which is going to go into the fuselage in a moment. Then there's the construction of the internal engines. So a couple of pieces there for each side. And then you have this section, which was on those 2 identical sprues. Bottom part is not quite identical, so you just need to cut off a couple of those supporting points, and then that glues together. And then you have the insides of the engines. That's one sub-assembly. So you end up with the sandwiching part. You have the cockpit sub-assembly, engine sub-assembly, and then the 2 halves of the fuselages join up together. Now with those anchoring points, so the 6 anchoring points on that front sub-assembly, and then the 4 that are on the back, it's going to hold that fuselage really rock solid. Over here we start getting into the wings. So the wings you need to pay attention to because you need to put in particular holes. So it seems that they've already forethought different versions of the aircraft. So you need to open up particular holes that are going to suit this version. So pay attention to this part. So you've got the base of the wings, which is in one piece, and then you have the upper sections. Over here, this is a large structural piece. That was a big chunky part, which is basically the spar support for the wings. And within there, that's going to have the detail for the main undercarriage. So that's all being built here. That particular part is glued onto the base of the wings. So that's giving it all that structural element there. And then you've got your top sections that go into place. All right, so that's your wing sub-assembly. And once that's all together, that mates together with the fuselage. So that's the bulk of it put together. Now with that, on the base of the cockpit, you have this undersurface of the nose. And this is basically the opening for the undercarriage for the front end. Over here, we have the intakes being built. So this is a particular section where they've used multiple pieces to get that offset look of the deflectors and then the tunnels to go into the engines. So you've got your left hand side, your right hand side, and then as they're put into the fuselage, they actually go into the voids here and are slid inside. Okay, so here we go with the horizontal stabiliser. The horizontal stabiliser is actually hinged. You have a couple of plates here that complete the base, and then we move on to actually I missed something. Oh, here we go. And this is the sub-assembly of the tail. This particular section here is the pivoting point for your horizontal stabiliser, and once that goes together, that sandwiches it all together. On this point here, you'll see this is the arresting hook, which is used on the carrier-based aircraft. Now this is a section where they go about the construction of the exhaust nozzles. So these are the individual 6 pieces, which I showed earlier, that has all that great internal detail. So 6 pieces put into the base, and then you make 2 of those, and they just fit into the engine points on the fuselage. And this is the back plate of the tail. Okay, so here we're getting into some of the finer details. This is the undercarriage gear doors. Now they're in 2 pieces, which, like I said before, usually you find these in 1, but by molding it in 2, you're getting extra surface detail on this piece. And when glued together, you get a lot more effect. So here the bay doors are going in with their supports, various little sensors going in as well. Over here, there's the nose landing gear cover. So that's in the front end. The nose gear getting assembled. You've got the front nose gear door as well, again in 2 pieces for the additional detail. Over here we've got the sensor for the nose. So the nose cone has a separate sensors. So you have the option of 2 different sensors. So pay attention to which version you're building. So B version is this particular shape here, or A and C is the alternative. Here we get into the main gear, which is under the the wings. So you've got the big struts, they're being put together. You've got the other gear doors. This is quite large chunky components. Over here we've got the air exhaust outlets, which go into the center of the fuselage, and basically these 3 components are fit inside. At this point we get into choice of the wingtips. Okay, so you can either have them deployed, so out flat, or you can have them folded, so they'll be folded up like this. And this is a very clever part, because this is where they have the separate joining pieces. So you either have the flat ones, which are set at the special angle, so they have a slight wingtip up look, or you can have the folded ones, which are actually bent, actually like so. And with the bent ones, you have this quite a heavy join there, because quite a lot of other kits have them separated, and it's a very weak joint. But with this particular choice, you get a very strong joint, you get the perfect angles, and you also don't have any unsightly lines, because they've designed these to be part of the panel line shape. Over here you have the flaps. Again, you can choose those to be either flat or lowered. So that option is made just by putting in the different hinge components. So you got your flat ones or your angled ones. And this is the point where you fit in your wings. So these are glued into place on the main wing. So either the folded ones or the deployed ones, again with the flaps as well. Okay, so here you've got your speed brakes or air brakes. Now these are mounted on the wings as well. There's little voids for those. And again, these can be either glued in closed, or you can have them open as well. So open obviously makes it a little bit more interesting, but it can be a little bit more fiddly because you get extra bits and you have things hanging about. Over here we have the pylons being done. So these are the pylons used for the sidewinders. Over here we have the construction of the sparrows being put together. So you see the single piece here with the stabilizing fins being fit. Here you have the sidewinder, so you can see how that's the partial assemblies here for the nose, and then the tail section, and then the fins going on that one as well. This is the point where they actually mount it onto the aircraft. So the sparrows have their particular points within the fuselage, and then the sidewinders are mounted on those pylons. Over here we have the drop tanks. So there's two smaller drop tanks for the wings, and then one larger drop tank, which is fitted in the center of the fuselage. So here we're doing the main drop tank, which is going in the center. And then we've got some more pylons here, which are for the external drop tanks. So these are the small drop tanks, which are going on the wingtips, or I guess on the wings themselves. Over here we have the vertical stabiliser. So the vertical stabiliser is built up in various components. So this is to allow for various options of the Phantom to come out in the future, I'd say. So this particular version has these particular sensors. So you've got a main left and right half, and then you have the leading edge, which is glued together. Now once that's assembled, that just slides on top of a blade guide in the fuselage, which helps it align perfectly vertically. Now this part is a little bit different because this is the final parts of the cockpit being completed. Usually the cockpit is all finished at the beginning, but this is the ejection seat, the pilots, and some of the instrument panels being put in towards the end. Over here we have the Canopy framework. So this is the base framework, and then also the instrument cover. And this is the point where we start getting into the canopy. So this is where we talked about either your choices of an open canopy with the multiple pieces, or the closed canopy with less pieces. And again, the mask will be supplied. So they'll be pre-cut. So these are the instructions of where each different mask goes. And then once that's complete, you have all the internal framework, which is really very highly detailed, because if you're doing the open version, these are wide open. You see all these details in each of these panels. So you've got the joining component there, you've got your back canopy, front canopy, and then this is the point where the canopy is actually put into place on the fuselage. So this top section is a closed canopy. So a lot simpler. It's got the three components, so they're very easy to align. Looks very, very streamlined. The open canopy has the more components, and it's good that they're all in separate parts. So there's no need to cut, because sometimes if you only get this one, you have to cut it up. Looks very messy. Or if you get the open one and you try and do the flat closed version, it can leave a lot of gaps. So you've got great choices either way. Over here, if you want the fuel probe deployed, this is where you fit it. If you've already closed it off in the beginning, so you'll omit that part. And then here you have the choices of the ladder either deployed, or you can have it closed off. So you have your two options there. And then that's the end of it. Okay, so that's a complete Tamiya 1/48th scale Phantom F-4B. This was their first production version. This is the version which came out for the Vietnam conflict, used quite extensively. The marking is included inside naval. So they give you three really nice decals. We didn't get any decals with this particular pre-production kit, otherwise I would have shown you. I would have been happy to do that. There's a good chance they'll be printed by Cartograph again. They have been getting Cartograph to print most of their aircraft decals of late. And it's an amazing kit. So this particular one, I guess, falls within the same sort of vein as the F-14 48 scale kits they've released recently. It has a lot of complicated parts to add detail. So the engineering is designed to make a very tough and strong model, and also allow it to have a lot of detail, because more parts allows better molding of surface detail. So you end up with a very, very nice model. It'll be a complicated build, so I wouldn't recommend this for a beginner. It will go together very well with the fit, as all Tamiyas do. So going on with that, so in the future, please look out for the review of this particular kit. I'm going to put it together and we'll check out what it looks like at the end of it. So if you have any questions, please write your questions just underneath, and we'll answer them as soon as possible. Now, I think it looks absolutely fantastic. It has that super fine surface detail. So with the engineering, they've designed it so you shouldn't have to sand very much. There's always a little bit of sanding involved, but the whole idea is they want to engineer it so you don't sand off all that beautiful fine detail. So this is a really beautiful kit. It should be coming out shortly. So I hope you've enjoyed my open box and had a good idea and look inside. So thank you for watching.